Do not be fooled. Coronavirus is not contained. So I keep hearing these reports. Oh, we look at the numbers and it looks like we're about ready to start reversing this trend and so on and so forth. But I think the problem is that they're comparing those numbers to historic numbers, to things like SARS and stuff. And to say, well, you know, at this point in the SARS outbreak, this is the point it started to peak and it started to die off. But you got to understand, SARS is a completely different virus. You can't compare the numbers of coronavirus to SARS and assume there's going to be a one-to-one translation in how this thing spreads. It just doesn't work that way. And so people who are, even officials who are out there claiming that this is contained, they're being overly optimistic or they're lying. One or the other. And I fear that this may already be a pandemic and we just don't realize it. And I've been looking at some numbers. And again, I'm on the World Health Organization website here. And these are the numbers I'm relying on to come to my conclusion. So it's not some, conspiracy theory BS that I'm just making up. No, these are the numbers reported by the WHO. And I've noticed some disturbing trends. And one thing we really need to keep our eye on is Singapore. Right? Singapore looks like they're having a problem. And if you ask me, I honestly feel like we need to start banning travel from Singapore. Singapore has already spread the coronavirus to other countries. So there's already been cases where people traveling from Singapore have spread it to other countries. I believe it was France who got their case from Singapore. So not all cases are coming from China. China, on the other hand, is a whole nother story, right? They're a complete disaster right now. I mean, look at this map. It's everywhere. And the numbers are just, they're not looking good. I know we recently had that spike just last night where it was like 15,000 new cases in China. Well, no, that's not the case. It's not that there were 15,000 new cases of coronavirus in China overnight. It's just, one, they changed their diagnostic method. So they're allowed to diagnose more cases at once. When before it had leveled off at 3,000 new cases. But that was because that was the most they can confirm a day. The most they can confirm a day was 3,000 cases a day. And that's why we were only getting 3,000 new cases of coronavirus in China. It's not that there were 3,000 new cases a day. It was much higher than that. Just the most we can register was 3,000. It's like that scene in Chernobyl with that guy with the recording device, and he reads, oh, the radiation is only at 3.6, when really it was much higher. But the most that their device could record was 3.6. And the guy was like, oh, well, that's not great, but it's not terrible, right? Because that's the most they can see. And the same thing is happening with coronavirus. Our ability to detect new cases in coronavirus is limited. We're with that device that can only register 3.6 when really our radiation is at 100,000. Right? And the same thing is happening with coronavirus. And it's not the people we know who have it who are spreading it. It's the people we don't know who have it who are spreading it. The incubation period for coronavirus is 2 weeks. So someone can have coronavirus for 2 weeks, can infect other people over those 2 weeks, and not even know they have it. They start to show symptoms. They get checked out. They get confirmed as having coronavirus. But by that time, they've already spread it. So when we see these numbers of confirmed cases, just consider it as intel that's 3 weeks, that's 2 weeks old. I mean, maybe they're being proactive and checking possible people who might be contaminated, but I don't know if they're being that proactive enough. So let me show you why I've been looking at Singapore, though, and why I feel like they've been a problem. So if we look at the World Health Organization numbers, now we look at China and we know it's really bad in China. But we have China contained. Anyone traveling from China, we put them in quarantine immediately, and we wait the incubation period of 2 weeks to see if they start to show symptoms. And if they do, we check them for coronavirus. If not, we let them go. Okay, you're not showing symptoms, you look good. Okay, you're free to go. Right? So if it becomes a pandemic at this point, it's not likely to spread from China. It's likely to spread from a country who's already had an outbreak, who doesn't realize they have an outbreak. And I believe that could be the case in Singapore. Right? Because if you look at the numbers, right, and again, these are the numbers we want to look at. Total new cases with possible confirmed transmission outside of China. We look at these numbers, we see, and this is where a pandemic is going to come from. These numbers here right? That means, okay, so it's not cases that are coming from another country. It's cases that are happening within the country. So in Japan, you have 10 new cases, right? And it looks pretty bad, but I think the numbers in Japan start to look better over the next few days. This report, by the way, is from the 6th. Just so that we're clear on where we're at here. This report of February 5th, right? And again, these numbers are likely 2 weeks old by the time we even register these people have coronavirus. That means there's 10 cases of coronavirus in Japan on February 5th of people who probably got it 2 weeks ago. Same thing with all these numbers, right? So whenever we look at these numbers, we got to think at it from a perspective of this intel is 2 weeks old. We're fighting a war against this coronavirus, and we're getting intel that's 2 weeks outdated. And that makes it very difficult to fight this. But if we look at Singapore, right, we see it's only 4 here on this day, right? And there were 4 cases earlier at some point. But the problem is that I've been keeping an eye on Singapore. And consistently, since the 5th, we keep seeing, so here's the 6th, February 6th. We keep seeing new cases in Singapore. There's 3 new cases, right? And then on the 7th, there's 2 new cases. The 8th, there were 3 new cases. The 9th, 7 new cases. The 10th, 3 new cases. The 11th, 1 new case, which looks pretty good, okay. But then the very next day, I think we have 2. Yeah, and that's the 12th. This was yesterday, 2. And then today, we're back up at 3 new cases today. So basically, what we want to see is we want to see this number reach 0. And then after it reaches 0, we want it to stay at 0 for 2, maybe 3 weeks. I would say 3 weeks just to be comfortable, right? If we can get this number to 0, and then it stays at 0 for 3 weeks, that means, okay, we probably got it contained. But when we've consistently, ever since the 5th, seen new cases in Singapore, that's an indicator that it's not been contained there. And again, some of these underdeveloped countries are at greater risk of having an outbreak because their containment procedures and their resources are much more limited. And their containment procedures are not as sophisticated, right? And so they're at a higher risk of having an outbreak. We have countries like Singapore, Vietnam. Vietnam had a new case today, right? Africa. Imagine if it gets to Africa, right? And another thing we probably need to be keeping an eye on are places like Germany. We have 14 cases of person-to-person transmission in Germany. If this starts to break out in an EU country, in a European Union country, the risk of it spreading is very high because the European Union has open borders with all other EU nations, right? Meaning you can go from one country to the other without border checks. You could just hop in your car and drive. I'm in Germany. I want to head west. I want to drive to France. They can do that, right? No border checks. No one's going to stop them, right? And by the time we realize there's an outbreak, our intel is going to be 2 weeks behind, meaning there can be several thousand people who already traveled out of Germany, like, using Germany as an example. If it outbreaks in Germany, by the time we realize it's outbreaking in Germany, there can be thousands of people who've already traveled out of Germany with the coronavirus. They don't know they have it. They're given to people who don't know they have it. And the people who are getting it, they don't know they have it. And they're going to spread it to other people. And again, I want to reiterate, it's the people we don't know who have it who are the ones who are going to spread it. The people we know who have it, we're going to quarantine right away. And their risk of spreading it is near 0 at that point. Right? It's the ones we don't know. And our intel is 2 weeks outdated. And when we're consistently seeing new cases in countries like Singapore, that's something that needs to be taken very, very seriously. Again, the response in Singapore, I don't work for the World Health Organization, so I don't know what their response has been. But I feel like it needs a very strong response. Like, you need experts there yesterday, right? And you need to start teaching them, this is how you quarantine a virus and so on. I'm sure they have a way of controlling diseases in Singapore. but they need resources and they probably need some advisors too, if you would ask me. And I think the international community needs to be very involved with the situation in Singapore. Because personally, I believe if there's an outbreak outside of China, it's going to happen there. And that's the conclusion I draw by looking at these numbers. Again, all these numbers, I mean, at least for this day, we could look at yesterday. Yesterday, zeros across the board, right? Day before yesterday, nearly 4 in the United Kingdom, which is bad. But mostly these other countries, you see a lot of zeros, right? You don't see as many person-to-person transmissions. But in Singapore, you've just consistently seen that person-to-person transmission number staying steady, around, 1 to 5, right? There's a case of 7, there's cases of a little less. But it's been pretty steady and it's been pretty consistent. So I feel like we need to keep a very close eye on that. But to say that it's contained, we cannot say that, right? Because there's a very high probability that there are people out there who have it, that we don't know they have it, the government doesn't know they have it, they don't know they have it, right? And to say, okay, yeah, we got this contained, personally, I would not come to that conclusion until I see zeros across the board for at least 3 weeks. Then I'd be willing to say, okay, I feel like they finally got this contained. But I believe that we're underestimating how contagious this is. And if we look at this, was this a report from today? No, this is the 12th. Just to get an example of how contagious this is, let's look at this cruise ship, right? This cruise ship dropped, I believe, like 1 person off, right? He left. After the cruise ship dropped this guy off, they found out he had coronavirus. They're like, oh, crud. So they put the whole cruise ship on quarantine, right? This was 1 person, 1 case they found on there. It's now at 174, and this was, I don't know, was it a week and a half that cruise ship's been there? I don't remember exactly the day it started. But I just read an article from NBC saying that they just found 40 new cases of coronavirus on that cruise ship. And again, these are people who know that coronavirus is on the cruise ship, and they're actively taking measures to prevent themselves from getting it and to prevent themselves from spreading it. These are people who are actively aware of the virus, and they're trying to prevent the spread of it. And you still now have 210 cases. Let me see that article on NBC. Right, 44 new cases aboard cruise ship quarantined in Japan. Right here, 44 new cases. This was just, they just put this article up maybe an hour ago. 6:25 p.m., it's 8:25. So this article is 2 hours ago. This report came out at noon. So tomorrow, you're going to see that update in this number. It's going to be at least 210 on the 14th. But that, you have 210 cases on this cruise ship already. And that, from what we understand, was just 1 guy. And that just shows how contagious this virus is and how we cannot underestimate it. When we see consistently new cases in a place like Singapore, we really need to be keeping an eye on them. Because there could be people in Singapore right now who have it, we just don't know about it, right? 28 cases, that's just what we know about, and that intel's 2 weeks old. So if anybody says it's contained, again, they're being overly optimistic or they're lying. And again, when we look at the numbers of China, 60,000 confirmed cases, even with their new method, I'm telling you that number is low. And it could be possibly higher, and the Chinese government can know it's higher, but they don't want to report the truth. Again, I don't put a lot of trust in the communist China, in the Chinese Communist Party, and I don't put a lot of trust in their ability to accurately report numbers. So yeah, contained is not the word I'd use at this moment to describe this virus. Now, if I can see these numbers register 0 for 3 weeks straight, okay, I feel pretty good about saying it's contained. But until then, no. All I can say is be prepared. Stock up on some food. If you're in a city and that city gets quarantined, you're gonna want to have food in your house, right? The stores are gonna get rushed, right? They're gonna get emptied. You're not gonna be able to get food. You're not gonna be able to order food on Amazon because nobody's gonna be delivering anything to your house if you're in a quarantine city. So and it can happen in a snap of a finger, right? So Just be prepared. Because as soon as people start to suspect that their city is going to be put under quarantine, they're all going to start going to the stores. They're all going to start cleaning out the shelves and stocking up supplies. And you're going to be fighting those people for supplies. If you preempt that and be like, you know what, I'm just going to buy some rice and some beans and some dry food, you know, maybe 2 weeks worth, just put it in my shed. You know, hopefully nothing bad happens, but just in case it does, at least I got some food stored up. And then when everybody else rushes to get food and to get survival supplies, you don't have to go fight them for it because you kind of preempted that and be like, you know what, I planned ahead, I'm ready, I'm good to go. And that's, I can say that's the best you can do, is just kind of plan ahead and think about it. You know, until it's contained, just prepare for the worst. That would be my advice. Anyone can do whatever they want, but that would be my advice. And keep an eye on Singapore. I'm going to see if I can get a daily report up and just, you know, report daily on what I'm seeing and what I feel like, where I feel like this is going. But yeah, I'll see if I can bring myself to put a video up tomorrow. But keep an eye on Singapore, and thank you for watching.